Have you been watching everything that's going on in sports? The sports world is completely different now. The terrain has changed as COVID-19 has even affected the sports world. As we know, sports shut down for almost 3.5 months. Now, we've seen the success of the bubble for Major League Soccer and for the NBA. With 0 negative tests since they've been in the bubble, before they got to the bubble, lots of negative tests. But now we are seeing the NFL start their season. And if you have been watching Hard Knocks on HBO, you see that the protocol and normal day-to-day of an NFL team has changed greatly. Now, we're going to have a deep conversation today about all things sports, and maybe things you don't think about, and the consequences that come with moving everything to fall. Recently, as you know, college football has made this move to move or postpone or cancel their football and athletic programs for the fall. Some of them cancel them altogether, and we'll start again in 2021. So we have an expert here today and a former NFL agent here today to break down what this all means. Find out what this all means and a little bit more coming up next. This is To The Point. It's another great day, another great episode. As you guys know, I do a little freelancing as a national media correspondent on sports. I love talking about sports, and today I have an amazing expert here, actually a Rutgers professor and former NFL agent and former arena football team owner joining us today. We're going to be talking about a little bit of everything that's been going in the sports world and how COVID-19 has changed the sports world as we know it. And the sports world, as you probably do know, is based off money. But you don't think about it from the college perspective. With the Pac-12 and the Big Ten canceling or postponing their season until the spring, now college football and all their sports joins the spring sports, which include baseball and many others. What a lot of people haven't thought about is how this affects the leagues and conferences that are still going on. I was recently asked on TV how I felt about the bubble prospect of college football and why it wouldn't work. The answer is really big. It's easy. They're just too darn big. If you think about all the teams that are in Division I college football alone, it just would be hard. It's not like the NBA where there is a certain amount of teams that you know are going to be good and had already started a season and can throw them in, or the way that Major League Soccer did their play-in tournament. Now, recently they crowned the Portland Timbers as the Major League MLS is back tournament, and now you see Major League Soccer returning to their home fields and will be playing without an audience for right now or a crowd, but they're going to be playing at home. Out of the bubble, we'll see how that works. And we also know that the NFL is just a short few weeks away from starting their season. And recently we heard from Cowboys owner of, obviously the Cowboys owner would be the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, is on the record as saying this season for home games, the Cowboys will have fans in the stadium. It's true. A lot of teams are working on how they can put fans in the stadium. Even Major League Baseball, we're hearing, is trying to put fans in the stands for at least the playoffs. Major League Baseball, as of today, is still the hot dumpster fire that is 2020, with some players still not returning to the field and still having issues as we go about. So that leads a lot of questions to what happens to these college athletes, how COVID-19 has affected nearly everything, and where do we go from here? Because remember, folks, less than a year from now, the 2020 games will be played in Tokyo in July of 2021. I know it's confusing, but here to help figure out this and many other issues, we have a great guest returning to our show. So let's get to the point with today's guest. show, Andrew. How you doing today?
Oh, great.
So the last time you were on, we were talking about sports starting. And it did start. I mean, we've got the NBA bubble, which has been fantastic. 0 positive test results. Some minor misbehavior at the beginning of when they started in Orlando, but nothing major has happened. And even seeing the NBA and Players Association and letting their family members, and they were very strict in their rules, I saw them as they were written, included agents are not welcome. Neither are personal chefs, masseuses, girlfriends, side action. None of that's invited, but your children and your mom and dad and immediate household can be even flown in by the team. So it's awesome. I know I'm excited. Dame Lillard, his little son, Junior, is always fun. He's a fan favorite when you see the little guy because he's like his dad. And his dad is probably one of the most underrated NBA players there is in the league right now. He's fun to watch. I mean, I've enjoyed the bubble. I don't know. Have you been watching any of the games in the bubble?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, once you get on the court, the games are the games.
Yeah.
So I think that's what all the players have been waiting for, and
Absolutely.
the challenge that they have is if you want to play, here's the rules you got to go by. And the NBA has almost been a model for all of sports in how to run it.
Also them and Major League Soccer. Let's not sell Major League Soccer out. They were under that microscope because they were the first team into the bubble. And they had a couple bumps along the way. A couple teams had to pull out due to testing. But we've seen them go perfect. Now, they just all returned home after they finished the Major League Soccer is Back tournament. That's a mouthful just to name a tournament. And they crowned the Portland Timbers that tournament champ. Now, they all return home and get to play. I actually think it did a couple things. As we've watched soccer internationally, very well received, a lot of people watching. But Major League Soccer has really gained an audience here in America during COVID because people are enjoying watching it and it's actually fun. And the camera angles, I'm all about it. And yes, I have a few clients that work for a couple of the teams, so it makes it even more exciting. But I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think Major League Soccer is getting a passing grade?
I think so. I mean, they had their scare in the beginning because with FC Dallas and Nashville both having to pull out right at the beginning, everybody was holding their breath to see how the rest of it was going to go, and it basically went flawless from there. And FC Dallas and Nashville, they actually played the other night to at least get a game in kind of after the fact, and it's nice to see them back, and the NBA gets a lot of attention for their bubble because their season's going to go a lot longer, but MLS had similar success, and they're actually hoping to bring their teams back to the regular competition still this fall, and hopefully allow fans into the stadiums in some limited capacity too. So that'll be interesting to watch.
So that brings us to teams or organizations or leagues behaving badly. And I think the winner so far of leagues not doing well, I don't think anybody can dispute this, is Major League Baseball. We had the Florida Marlins had over 18 players test positive. We've had, as of this recording, the St. Louis Cardinals have not touched a baseball field and played an opponent since July 28th. Absolutely absurd. We recently had a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians have to drive home because he decided that the rule about not hanging out with outsiders when you're on the road, he decided, hey, I'm going to go to dinner with friends, and had to drive himself home in a rental car because the team wasn't happy about it. And also the Seattle, well, this is, we won't bash on the Seahawks quite yet. It's easy for a Niner fan to want to go and bash on something, but baseball. What is going on? COVID-19, and we'll start with COVID-19, and then I'll pick on the Astros because that's my next thing. Because as a Yankee fan, I have to do it. So, what's your thoughts on how they've just had so many missteps for 60 games in 67 days? This seems like a disaster, especially with the Cardinals.
Well, what you've seen differently in MLS and NBA is the players' associations and the leagues got together and they said, how are we going to do this? And how are we going to do this successfully? Baseball has always had a more contentious relationship between the players and the teams. And you see how it's played out. I think Major League Baseball was pushing to do the bubble in a similar way in Arizona, and that got shot down by the players. So literally on the brink of just canceling out the 2020 season. They came with this model that they have now. But there's so many risks that you encounter along the way, because basically the players and staff are subject to everything else that you and I are exposed to every single day, with the exception that they're getting tested more frequently. So the tests help you catch the cases, but here, where you might not test positive for 6 or 7 days after you're exposed, and when you're playing every single day, that risk of one infection coming into the clubhouse can knock out, 5-10 players almost overnight. And there's not much you can do, because it'll happen before you even know.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because that's actually skipping around in sports, but I've also heard that from coaches within the NFL have talked about this out loud. This is the first year, and this comes from a couple of my friends talking. One of the big concerns is we have the cuts. As you know, this was the first week where the NFL dropped down to 80 in their roster numbers, which is good because it's crazy. I think they started the season off with over 100 on their rosters as they returned to camp. So it's easier with smaller numbers, obviously, to keep things clean and not worry about it. But this is the first season, there's going to be a lot of roster movement, one, and two, some of the roster movement will be caused by positive tests, which will sideline some big names. Hopefully not. I know a lot of those guys are taking this pretty serious, but you never know. You don't control it. We're seeing that firsthand all over the place. But it is interesting, Major League Baseball has struggled with this. And also you add into the rules that they have in place this year with no fighting, which we've seen only one team involved in the fight so far. Everybody's favorite outside of Houston, Texas, the Astros, who we've already seen more suspensions passed out to other people than any players who cheated. Joe Kelly got 8 games for staring somebody down, and then you just saw this, which they think he's going to appeal that. And if I was his agent, I would absolutely have him appeal that, because all he did was make a face, didn't draw a fight, benches did not empty. Now the fight between the Athletics and the Astros, Citron, what did he get, 22 games, which was the steepest punishment an Astros ever received in anything. So that is going to be interesting, because he's a bench coach, so it's not like it affects him. 22 games. He's like, darn. He just doesn't get paid.
Well, that's 1/3 the season this year.
That's huge, right? So, what do you think? I mean, can Major League Baseball continue on? It's an odd circumstance that you have with the Cardinals still not playing, falling game behind, and only 60 games, period. There's nothing more, nothing less. I mean, how does baseball continue on here?
Well, I think if they can keep some semblance of control, they have a shot at getting to the end of the season. But it's almost going to be like a NASCAR race, where you have crashes on every lap, and then whoever's left at the end of the race, someone's going to win. Yeah. So that's probably the way Major League Baseball will be, where you're going to have teams that are going to miss games, whether it's positive tests or scares and precautions taken, that not everyone's going to get all of the games in. So the ones that do and have the opportunity to have the highest win percentage, they'll have a shot at the playoffs. And a team like St. Louis, they probably won't get a chance to make up that many games. So they might be out simply because they just don't get the games in.
Oh, wow. It is tragic, because you feel bad for those ball players. And I know one thing that we didn't talk about the last time. I think we touched on it for a second. But I feel for the minor leaguers that are out there. All minor league baseball was shut down. Most of us live in cities with single A or even summer leagues that go on. I know I live by a team that only plays in the summer, the Hops. I love them. They're the Hillsborough Hops. Come on. And I mean, Dale Murphy played there, so we're not going to hate. I mean, he's a resident from here. We've got some good ball players out of here, and we're in the running to try to get a Major League Baseball team here in Portland, which we could use another sport here. But that brings up these minor leaguers. I mean, as a former agent, I mean, what do you think about this for these guys? They lost an entire season, and we're going to jump to the next folks who also have lost some time. But let's talk about these minor leaguers first. I mean, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, you have the twofold impact. So minor league baseball in general just shut down for the year, because from a financial point of view, it doesn't make sense for them to play the games, because you don't have TV revenue. So there really is almost no revenue to be gained. and it's all cost and expense at that point. So it's hard to hold it against them because it's a good business decision, quite frankly. From a player's point of view, I mean, it's a year of development. You want to play too, so you have the anxiety that comes from that, and a lot of these guys are kind of beside themselves because what do you do? Like, do you go get a regular job? Like, you have no alternative. It's not like you can go, if you're lucky enough, maybe you can latch on with a team in Japan or Korea for the year if you might have been like a AAA player. But I think that's pretty tough to do under these coronavirus conditions, too, because of the travel bans and lockdowns between countries.
I agree with you. It's a tough decision. So let's talk about this one, which has been the biggest noise in the room for the last couple of weeks. The NCAA's decision for, well, not all NCAA, but a lot of college football. We know the Big 12, is it Big 10? Just so many things with big in the names. The Big 12 decided to postpone their season. The Pac-12, I don't know, Pac-10. I always get them confused.
The Big 10 and the
Big
Pac-12.
10, there we go. See, I knew the numbers were around. Just that Marine in me comes out sometimes, and the numbers in these conferences' names gets just so confusing. We know both of those have postponed their entire seasons for all sports for the fall to the spring, which will be interesting to have so much. And of course, the SEC and ACC is still planning and is at the other big team.
The Big 12.
The Big 12, there we go. See, I knew there was another 12 in there. The Big 12 is also going to hold, they're going to still play their fall games. Actually, the Big 12 is planning on starting in 3 weeks, the first week of September, with the SEC starting the 26th of September. What is going to go on? How are we even going to crown a national champion in college football? And is it 2 seasons in one? What do we call 2021 with everybody going to play again in 2021? Is there going to be 2 college football seasons in 2021?
We might see that. I'm actually curious to see if they'll have enough teams to actually do a top 25 poll. But you know, the NCAA left it up to the conferences to make their own decisions. And for a conference like the Big Ten, where Rutgers had a big outbreak just a couple of weeks ago, Maryland had one, Indiana had one. There's a lot of concern over a heart condition that's been linked to COVID too, and one of the Indiana players had this manifest, and his mother made a big plea as well. So it's really hard for the Big Ten schools to press forward under those conditions because you're already kind of teetering on the brink. In Southeast, you know, football is king, and they're going to play unless they absolutely can't. Yeah. And I think they've kind of shown that. The states, too, ironically, I just happened to be looking at statistics right before this, and Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama are the 4 highest states in the number of new cases per capita that are coming up. So the data doesn't look good for them, but they're going to look to press on. The challenge is and we were talking about the NFL before, where you have 90 people in camp. Well, a college football team has over 100 players on it typically, and you add in staff into that too. Every single person increases your risk of exposure, and you're dealing with 20-year-old kids for the most part, right? They're going to be 20-year-old kids. They're going to want to go out to parties. They're going to forget to social distance. They're not going to wear a mask. And every single one of those just increases your risk. So then when you bring those 100 people together, that risk of transmission is just so great. And that's what I think makes football the most difficult sport to pull off, not because of what happens on the field, but simply because of the number of people who are involved and the risk of transmission. Yeah. So something like the NBA bubble would be extremely difficult for the NFL to do. It's doable. It would be expensive. But on a college level, it's almost impossible to do.
So let's talk about economics for this, for college football. They already lost March Madness. period. That was devastating to them. They lost the Baseball World Series, which was huge. Also, now you're taking away another revenue monster for a lot of these schools. We've seen the displeasure from Michigan and Ohio State. Their two outspoken coaches have given their feedback that they don't get to play each other. It costs money, and some of these big schools obviously could probably carry on because they have amazing trademarks and a loyal fan base, but these smaller colleges that depend on the money for playing in Michigan, Ohio State, those teams are not going to get that money. How does college football keep some of these universities able to stay D1 and still make money? This is, at the end of the day, sports is about money. You know that better than anybody. How does college football recover from this? This is going to be years of recovery. Stepping this back has to be hard.
Well, and it's not just college football, but it's college athletics in general, because the way most of these athletic departments are structured is they're hoping to make enough money in football and basketball that it can support the rest of their programs. And the challenge is, if you're not playing football, there goes a lot of your revenue. But it's also the bulk of your costs, though, too. But the challenge is most of these contracts for head coaches, for example, are multi-year contracts. So if you don't play, you still have to pay the coaches and salaries. So you're still getting 60, 70% of your expense, but none of your revenue at that point. So the math doesn't really work out. I've been a proponent for colleges to get creative with what they do with their athletic departments as a whole. Because if you look at something like the Big Ten, for example, where they have their own television network, well, what are those sports that can run with the least amount of risk? So which sports are naturally social distant? Which ones can you put other precautions in there to keep people safe? Because if you get the brand out there, the brand can continue to make at least some revenue for the programs. Because in every sport, the players want to play, right? So they want to be safe, but they want to play. Like that's their livelihood outside the classroom. So the more people you can get in action, the better. The question is, how do you do it safely? And if you can at least get the brand out there in the media, you're going to harness at least some of the revenue to cut down on some of the losses.
So let's stay with college football here. So what have you heard about these players' eligibility coming up? A lot of these guys, their seasons, do they lose their season? I mean, has college football at least done these guys right to make sure that they're going to be able to keep their eligibility next year since they're not going to get a season?
Yeah, pretty much all of the conferences and the NCAA has basically said that if they lose the year, that players will be able to retain eligibility for another year. The challenge that comes in is that the scholarship limits that exist, if you're going to keep a class of individuals for one extra year, how does it affect the people coming in from as freshmen the next year? Because unless they increase the scholarship limits, you're still going to get hit.
Yeah. Well, that's a great pivot to my next question for you. Oh, my goodness. Here's my problem, and I'm a dad of an athlete in high school. She is going to be a junior. It's hard because all fall sports, I mean, she's a track person, so all fall sports have been pushed for most of this, across the country, again, except in the South where they continue to want to play sports and ignore very high numbers. Here, where I live on the West Coast, like most schools, everybody's playing in the spring now. How does this work, or have you heard, because I can't get a straight answer from anybody, how are colleges recruiting these players? Like your junior year to your senior year, if you're not playing a season, literally you're going to graduate. Let's talk about the seniors of this coming season. Most of your season's over. You're now going to play in the winter, which is interesting, and you could sign your scholarship and go to school almost at the same time. What do we do for these college athletes? And I want to not to college athletes, high school athletes, and then I want to talk about youth sports, because a lot of them are being cheated out of time that's going to help them, and it seems like now there's this huge backlog. You brought up the scholarships, so I'm wondering, what about these poor seniors, especially in football? You're going to go recruit a class. How are you going to pick these guys?
Well, and I think in youth, and I'm very involved on the youth sports level and also with high school. And I think there's a recruiting impact for the marginal player, right? Because if you're missing out on one season, so to speak, so if you played your junior year and you're missing out on senior year, well, you have film, you've been out there a bit, so colleges can still continue to recruit, and they know who the strongest players are. If you're in that middle tier, those are the ones that are hurt the most because that's a year of development, that's a year of exposure when you might have been under the radar screen before. So it's really incumbent upon the players themselves to try to showcase themselves as best as possible. So, how do I get my credentials out there? And the way the recruiting process works is most of every sport's a little bit different, but for the most part, the players themselves can reach out to the coaches to basically say, look, here I am, here's what my athletic profile looks like. Are you interested in me or not? So I don't think that the students are necessarily harmed that way. The reliability of the scouting is what's going to suffer, right? Because you look good on film, but I never really got a chance to see you play live. So I'm going on faith that you're going to continue to be good.
Yeah, that's true. So what about these youth sports, right? Little League has been affected. Obviously, Pop Warner football, soccer, which is a huge youth sport, leads to, how are we going to recover this? Kids need to play. I have an avid hooper in my house who, obviously, we can't play basketball. Now, on a side note, I did just hear in Oregon and a few other states, they've decided non-really contacty sports will be allowed to resume at least practicing. So volleyball, cross country, obviously, is not very. You're by yourself. A lot of alone time there. Those sports are going to be able. Football again, not going to be there. Basketball, yes. What are we going to do with these youth sports? How does youth sports recover from this? Little League suffered for sure because this hit right as their season was starting. They literally had tryouts and then boom.
For a lot of youth sports, they have been able to ramp up over the course of the summer. So in New Jersey, as of June 22nd, we were able to roll forward with most sports. So baseball has had a fairly active season. The soccer tournament season during the summer has been active. Lacrosse. So I think, and I was helpful in the effort to kind of help mobilize some of that here in the state. And subsequently, I got elected to the New Jersey Youth Soccer Board of Directors. So I've been very intimately involved in the issue. The numbers aren't that low. Parents and kids are coming out for fall sports. One of my clients is a large sports league in New Jersey, and their numbers are off about 20% from what it would have been the year prior. But that's a preliminary number, and we know from that we usually see a bump of 10 to 15%. So they might be right where they would have been in a non-corona environment. Some of that comes to do with kids have just been locked down for so long that they just want to play. And as long as parents feel that the precautions are being put in place, that I'm probably not at a heightened risk being on the field versus other things I would be doing.
Yeah, true. I think that's my concern is this, and I think football is the one, again, is going to suffer the most because it is truly a bigger squad of folks. Soccer teams are not gigantic. Basketball teams, volleyball teams, all of those are not gigantic teams, but even Pop Warner football teams, even with the littlest guys, there's 60 guys on the field. There's 60 people playing. Everybody's signing up. Now, obviously, their numbers will be lower, but I just think football is one of those sports that already had a stigma for it for the concussion side of the house. Now you add in it's this sport where you're kind of everybody's really close together a lot of the time, even at the line of scrimmage. I think that youth sport's going to hurt. But let's talk about these athletic charities and nonprofits that are out there. What can be done? How do we support those? We want to keep those around. There's some amazing leagues that are out there that depend on seasons and sports to go on. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I know people want to. I know I'm one of them. How do we donate to these, and what are some good ones that we should be helping out and that need our support so they can continue doing the great things that they do throughout the nation for our youth sports?
Well, so for the most part, most sports organizations at the local level are supported by program fees. So your child plays in the league. Your registration fees are what keep the organizations going. Most of them are volunteer driven. So there are some impacts to them. Obviously, the poorer areas where they don't have the economic well-being, those are the ones that are going to suffer the most, because whatever limited resources they might have coming in, those are the ones that are getting hit hard. I know with New Jersey Youth Soccer, USA Swimming, for example, just gave out $3 million to clubs nationwide to help kind of keep them afloat and help offset some of the losses that they had. With soccer in New Jersey, we're working on some initiatives to really kind of support some of the urban programs that exist out there too, because we just know that they were already kind of financially strapped, and the limited numbers really kind of what makes it difficult is, even if the kids want to play, if parents have been out of work and it's a matter of, do I pay for food or do I pay for registration, it's not hard to figure out which way you're going to have to go in that case.
That's very true. So let's talk about it. We're talking about youth sports. We've talked about college. What we should be talking about right now, if this was normal 2020, which I don't even know if we could ever use the word normal in 2020 in a sentence, but we should be just finishing the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Should have just finished actually this week. They would have finished, I believe. And now that's going to be pushed to the 2020 games are now in July 2021 in Tokyo. We have our college athletes who will be hopefully being able to train. I think of swimming, rowing, and soccer are the chances that Team USA really knocks it out of the ballpark when it comes to winning gold. Summer games are our strong point. We thank Michael Phelps for making everyone know exactly who we are on a map. And of course, our gymnasts are pretty amazing. How do these players get to train? Obviously, soccer is a fall sport for college. Swimming, I don't even know what swimming in college is. I apologize.
Swimming's my son's a college swimmer at the Naval Academy.
Ooh,
so
nice.
And he's an Olympic trial qualifier too. So we're definitely watching what happens with that closely. But those are winter sports. So for the most part, the decision hasn't been made on what's going to happen there. But swimming's a perfect example, though, of what I was saying before, when colleges can get creative around this, right? Is with swimming, you don't necessarily have to compete every weekend, because you want to compete when you're at your peak. So to space out meets in a certain way, to do things on a regional basis, like there's a lot of different opportunities to allow that sport to get out of the gate. The challenge for athletic departments are they're looking at it as a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's probably the wrong way to go, because you can definitely push things out the door, get some level of competition out there. It's just a matter of which programs you can do that with.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But from an Olympic standpoint, the jury's still out. I think Tokyo is really hoping that conditions improve to allow them to bring this together. But you have a cascading effect, because for every Olympian, there's an Olympic trials component. So there's many kids and adults that they might not make the Olympics, but just making it to their national trials is a huge accomplishment. So you're talking about millions of people worldwide that miss out on that opportunity of a lifetime if the games don't go on.
That is true, but I did, speaking of the Naval Academy, and as a Marine vet, I love to know that all three academies have agreed to at least play each other in sports moving forward, because I don't know why we take that cup so serious, but they sure do, and they all want the bragging right. And I know Air Force was the first out of the gate to talk a lot of trash, so they're really good at that, by the way, at the Air Force. But I'm all Team Navy as the Marine. We support them. So I always laugh when we go to the Army-Navy game in football. People go, what side are you on? I'm like, I'm a Marine. What side do you? Number one, I don't have to pick a side, but if I was, I'd pick the Navy. Their uniforms are cooler, and they actually throw the football instead of run right, run left, run up the middle, which I don't know how West Point gets away with doing that. That's their entire. That's the most boring football to watch, personally. Sorry, Army.
Right.
I'm just keeping it real. But congratulations to your son, by the way. Naval Academy is quite the accomplishment. Being a swimmer on our swim team is awesome. Funny to be in the Navy and swimming, but hey, that's just the Marine in me going, yeah, we're amphibious. So that's going to be interesting for the Olympics. Do you see the Olympics possibly being canceled again or delayed?
Well, if I think it's going to depend on the global conditions that exist, right? And everyone's kind of holding their breath that a vaccine is around the corner. Unless there's some type of vaccine that's developed by no later than next spring, I can't see it happening. I mean, you look at it's like a game of whack-a-mole that when one country starts to make progress, another one flares up. And if you think about the Olympics, it's bringing all of these nations together. So that it's likely that you're going to have countries that are just going to have to sit out regardless. But you hope you get to that point that majority of them can compete, because that's what makes the Olympics special, quite frankly.
What's scary is we would be one of those countries that other countries wouldn't want to be there because of our infection rate alone. So that's kind of scary as the country that we are, and Olympics are our specialty. Always good. So before you go, let's talk about one thing as your background of being an agent in the NFL. We're talking about contract negotiations. George Kittle just signed a very massive contract. Of course, then Travis Kelce said, hold my beer, and he signed a massive contract. So we have a lot of contract negotiations going on. Do you think that this is going to change COVID-19 and the way these players are playing? Obviously, we've seen players opt out. I think we have 25 players in the NFL have opted out. I think the number might be higher. I know the Patriots were affected the most.
Yeah, it's over 60.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I was thinking of the Patriots. I know they had the most. How does this work for their contract negotiations? Are these guys going to be judged for taking the season off for risk factor, or how is the negotiation going to work? Is it going to hurt their contract chances for taking the season off?
I don't think so. Everybody's situation is very different. So some have kind of family reasons why they're sitting out. So I don't know that that's going to have an impact that way. Obviously, if you sit out a year, you're 1 year older when you go into negotiations. There's always that risk that you fall out of shape, that your skills are going to erode. So that is probably the biggest risk. But I haven't looked at, of the players that sit out, how many of them are going into a contract year. Yeah. Because if they opted out, they are getting at least the minimum amount of money this year. Yeah. So financially, not playing probably doesn't hurt as much. But I don't see that big of an impact on the field. When people line up, they're going to play, right? So it might be in the back of your mind, but I think the NFL is doing the best job that they can in terms of making good decisions on safety protocols. I think the Players Association they haven't always seen eye to eye, but they are kind of working at making the season work out for the best, right? So
I agree with you, but did you see Jerry Jones? And I know other teams, but Jerry Jones, of course, the vocalist human being on the planet, and his team somehow claiming to be America's team, but I still don't understand that because I thought you had to win Super Bowls to be America's team. I'm just confused. Sorry, I'm not a Cowboy fan. Can you tell?
You must be a 49er fan.
Look at that bitter 49er fan over here. Like, we win playoff games. It's weird. I know you're supposed to do that. Sorry. I know Dak Prescott wants to be respected, but regular seasons.
One day they will.
One day. I'm sure someday they will. But Jerry Jones said that they will. Now, he did 3 weeks ago cancel season tickets. But the release, I read it, they're still selling tickets. They plan on having a season. They plan on having fans in the stands for home games. And they say they can do this, and only Jerry could say this in Jerryland, that the aerodynamic wind flow through the stadium makes it better for fans because it can blow whatever is in the stadium. I don't know. I'm like, Jerry, you really came up with this by yourself to make people feel comfortable. Do you think other teams in states where it's safe to play will be doing this and trying to attempt, because you're seeing it in Major League Baseball. The Reds are on record for attempting to want to do this in Ohio. I know California, they've talked about it. I mean, LA, for once, the Chargers and Rams have a beautiful new stadium that I'm sure they'd like to put fans in. It's beautiful. They didn't build it to be an empty,
Yeah.
Like
well, Las Vegas, same thing. That was going to be a brand new stadium opening, and they already said that they're not opening it for any fans at all. If you think about a lot of these stadiums, so Jerry World in Texas is 100,000 seats.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you have 10,000 or 20,000 people, it's a big number. But depending how they're going to space that out, you probably can do it. Now, NASCAR had an event last month where I think it was Bristol Speedway. I could be wrong on that, but 100,000+ seat stadium, they had 20,000 spectators. So you can do that with those types of facilities. I think college football the same way. For the places where they're going to play, I think you can fit limited numbers of people. The question is, what the capacity is and how can you space people out.
True.
But think about that. It's like going to a Marlins game. You have 5,000 people in a 50,000 seat stadium.
That's just called a regular season game for those guys. Oh, that's not nice, Eric. I know. I mean, I can't believe I said that out loud. I mean, let me just ask you before I let you go. Where do we stand on getting fans back in stadiums? I've heard from my sources in the NBA. The NBA actually has kept it because they're hoping, fingers crossed, that this vaccine actually goes through. Stage 3 testing is a huge step, but a lot of things can go wrong. It's a vaccine, let's just face it. I don't know if I want to be a guinea pig just throwing any kind of drugs in my body. That's my personal preference, but I want to go see sports. NBA's talked about launching their season in March now. Talk had always been moving it to December, which as an NBA fan, I absolutely agreed. It's later in the season as the NFL is starting to die down. College football is playing the really bad bowl games. So it makes sense for the NBA to start because then we have some space between them and the NHL and football, and you don't have one of those days where you're like, what team am I watching? Do you see them pushing their season back to this March date and becoming almost a summer sport? Because there's technically a gap in the summer. There's only it's been a one-horse race in the summertime for as long as I've been alive, which is Major League Baseball. And now you could have some competition in there.
I thought you were giving some love to MLS before.
Oh, sorry. Major League Soccer, I love you guys. And I live in Portland. I got to give a shout. They're great. I mean, I'm so happy that truly, I know you're a soccer guy.
Out there. So,
yeah, it's
so a lot of fun over there.
It's good for them, but I mean, I'm a fan of this, and I love seeing Major League Soccer doing what they're doing. And I think they're taking it so serious. I mean, knowing what goes on within these teams, how they handled it, and just seeing how they're doing everything and knowing what's going on. I think Major League Soccer and the NBA, again, I'm hoping that the NFL, and I see it, the NFL is paying attention. I wish Major League Baseball would, but I see these players, their biggest struggle is not playing in front of fans. You've heard that from LeBron James, Dame Lillard, Steph Curry. They're all like, man, this is horrible. This fake pumped-in sound. I mean, just the other night we watched Giannis headbutt somebody, and they had this weird sound like cheering was going on, and I'm like, it's weird. And then you've got the fans on Zoom. Somebody put a goat in the other day. Somebody put their pet goat in a seat. It's just weird. So, I mean, just kind of, where's your thoughts on this? If it works for the NFL, they bring fans in, do you think NBA can pull this off? Obviously, it's more compact. I think the biggest arena we have seats about 20,000. It's interesting. It's going to be difficult. Right? What's your thoughts?
So obviously, social distancing is the first and foremost thing that they're going to worry about, right? So if you're in a state that's going to allow spectators to attend those types of events, they're going to be a fraction of their normal capacity. So if you have a 20,000 seat arena, maybe you have 4,000 people in there, right? You're not going to see the numbers grow too much bigger than that in something like the NBA. I think the NBA in particular, when they were kind of looking at December as a potential restart date, the notion was that over the summer that you'll see the virus kind of die down, and it gives them a fighting chance to really kind of get started in normal circumstances, albeit a little bit later. But the virus hasn't let up at all. It's actually worse now than it probably was in April or May, nationally at least.
True.
And it all depends on a vaccine. Like if we see some progress around the corner, I think the NBA could potentially look to move up that date. But if they're falling back to March, it's probably because their intelligence is telling them that that's probably the earliest that we're going to see some benefits.
Yeah, because that's what they're saying. They want to play with fans. I know Adam Silver. I mean, that's the great thing about the NBA. I mean, David Stern the late David Stern did so many amazing things for this game, and just making it such a creature comfort for so many people. And then you see the NBA just killing it. And yeah, their views are down. I know sports has been involved in way too much politics in 2020, which is unfortunate. But I actually love the movement. I love the fact the NBA is the poster child for negative, positive tests. Their players are, for the most part, except for Giannis, are behaving themselves. And it's been great. And we got the first team starting to head home really soon. So they'll be done and their seasons are over. I just hope that we end up returning to some sort of resemblance of sports. I think it'll take a couple years. I hope by next spring we can have some fans in the stands and enjoying sports again, and I pray that we get a vaccine. But I want to thank you, Andrew, for joining us and getting into this cool conversation, because not a lot of people talk about this side of sports. We want to talk about what's going on, but there's so much behind the scenes that we don't think of the Olympics. We don't think of crowning national champions, and we never even got to that question, so we'll have to bring you back. But I figure we'll have you back in September after everything is basically going, and we'll have, hopefully the Cardinals will have started playing by September.
Maybe.
I hope. But, I mean, it's been great having you on the show, my friend, so we will definitely have you back on soon, everybody. Want to thank you for joining. And everybody else out there, we will be right back after these messages. Thank you for watching today's show. As always, if you'd like to be a guest or you know somebody that we should have on our show as a guest, feel free to email us at hello@tothepointtv.com. We look forward to hearing from you. And you can also email us if you have a complaint, want to give us kudos, high fives, or if you have an additional question for a guest. Feel free to email us again at hello@tothepointtv.com. Our Twitter is up and running, and it's for social good. Not yelling and screaming political or anything else crazy on our Twitter. So follow us on Twitter at @ToThePointTV, and we'll tweet back at you. And as always, we want you to check out our IG. We love Instagram. Our Instagram stories are up, they're buzzing, and they're meant for you. We love our fans and followers, and we want you to know who our guests are coming on, and we want you to engage with us, and we want to engage with you. So make sure you're following us at Instagram at @ToThePointTV. Now, we love you on Facebook, and we want to make sure, because you're probably watching this on Facebook, you're like, why would I? You already follow us. But tell a friend that they can come follow our show and never miss a live episode. As you know, here on Facebook, make sure you head, if you're not on Facebook watching this, then it's different, but our Facebook is To The Point with Eric Mitchell. So make sure you follow us there so you always get notified when our show goes live at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Now, for the folks over on YouTube. Now, YouTube, we love our YouTube, and our channel is growing, and we love you there. Now, if you missed the live show at 12 p.m. Eastern, you can catch the premiere, which is re-recorded. The premiere on YouTube goes down every day at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and simply just go do that. So remember, with YouTube, what we want you to do is smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and flick that bell. That's right, hit the bell. Give that bell some bell love, and that way you know when we're on air and you can catch our latest episode. Check out our playlist. All of them broken down by the day and the guest and show, so you can always stay up to date. Once again, on behalf of the entire team here at To The Point, we want to thank you for, again, tuning in and watching our show, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow on To The Point. As always, I am your host, Eric Mitchell. Be safe, be strong, be smart, and God bless America.
Let's get to the point with Eric Mitchell. Let's get to the point. Sit and enjoy. This is Eric Mitchell. He the host of the show. Get to the point. He is the voice. We needed this, something more. This is a daily show that's known for politics and the sports. Ain't no limit to whoever you may see at this point. conversation can never be disappointed. Whether tragic or it's happy, Eric will cover whatever's happening. Whether it be a gymnast, toe tapping, talking about nearly any athlete, not taking a back seat. You're never gonna get it past T. Everybody running from it, it's a stampede. But he's on it like this man who took that knee. Mr. Mitchell's way too crafty.